Welcome to Tracy Talks, a podcast about all things health, wellness, mindset, and motherhood, my favorite topics. Well, and tacos. Let's talk about those too. Join me for an honest conversation as we muse and amuse ourselves, where nothing is off the table and what we're after is an exponential personal growth curve. Most days you'll find a really warm hug, and on some days, a swift kick in the reality pants. This is not a look at me, but a come with me conversation where we will take a real life look at health and wellness topics such as hormones, fatigue, mood swings, brain fog, toxicity, mold illness, the healing journey, and so much more. Mindset. It's a highly underutilized tool on any journey. Knowing that our inner world creates the environment of our outer world, we'll talk about what holds us back from living the lives we know we were meant to live. Motherhood will forever be my most profound and satisfying life's work. As a homeschooling mom of 5 kids, I've been there, done that, and got the t-shirt. I love chatting about the practicalities of managing a home, shepherding hearts, and how to create a family culture that you're proud of, and how not to lose yourself in the process. My mission is to transform women's lives by balancing their hormones so they can get out of survival mode and feel like themselves again. If you're looking for your new health BFF who has the curiosity to ask the big questions, the determination to find the answers, and the ability to find humor in it all, you are in the right place. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining me on what I am affectionately calling my maiden voyage into the realm of the podcast world. So I thought it would be best if I start at the beginning. I'm not going to go back to the beginning of my life, but I am going to go back to the beginning of my own personal health journey, which started in 2015 for me. And the story can be quite consuming, quite lengthy, quite detailed. So I'm going to hit the highlights for you, but I can already tell that this will need to be told in a few different parts. So please look for part 2 and part 3 to complete this story after this one is done. There's just no way to sum it all up at once, right? And so I'm giving myself the grace to understand that parts of this story I am forgetting right now, but will be told over the course of my podcast journey. So if there's anything in particular that you're dying to know about and that I didn't hit, please just go ahead and let me know. I'd be happy to touch on it. The healing journey can be so confusing, so adventurous, so crazy at times. Sometimes when you get to the other side of it, you forget just how crazy it actually was. So I've done my best to record some important things that I want to hit for you. So let's just go ahead and get started. This will be my health story, part 1. So let's go. This is a story of a wife and a mother who was cruising along in life, happy in her station. I was 15 years into marriage with my high school sweetheart, 10 years into motherhood. I had 5 beautiful home-birthed, homeschooled children who were all thriving under my watchful eye by day and by night. Here I was sailing through my days using structure when necessary and lots of freedom too. After all, we raised these children on lots of land around us, and I like to say that they weren't officially civilized until we eventually moved to Tennessee and had to teach them what a stop sign and a curb was. These children grew up climbing trees and scaling walls and rolling around in dirt, and I wouldn't have it any other way, really. And so back then, I had made it my life's mission, and still is, to become the best mother that I could be, excelling in any task set before me. I was always up for this challenge, even though it baffled me day by day. It is by far the hardest thing a woman could ever be called to do. So, things like choosing the best math curriculum, easy. I love to research. Children pitching in, helping with household chores, got that in the bag too. My kids knew that they were valuable members of our little home society. Responsibility and discipline, yep, got that too. I knew from the earliest age that if I were to ever have kids, and listen, I didn't always want them, let alone a house full of them, but that will be another episode for another day. I wanted to like them. Does that make sense? I know that every mother loves their children, but I really wanted to have children that I enjoyed be around. As far as I could tell, the kids who were easy to be around were well disciplined, right? Does that make sense? So things that stump us as moms, right? Like, what do we make for dinner? Well, I solved that problem after lots of trial and error until I found something that I could be consistent with. My point here is that as challenging as raising little ones are, I loved it. And it gave me a lot of purpose and passion from day to day. So here I was raising my kids out in the country, these children who were raised on raw milk, grass fed beef, herbs for medicine, and common sense. They were growing up, indeed, to become the kids that I had hoped and prayed for. So let's go ahead and fast forward. Let's skip over the parts where we lived in West Africa for several years, where we moved across the country to live on a hay farm in the middle of the country with my father in law, to then another cross country move where we eventually landed and now currently reside in Middle Tennessee. Despite the curveballs that life seems to throw the best of us, we were moving forward, ever driving towards that family mission, which was to raise a godly family. So here I was, 6 weeks postpartum, with little did I know at the time, was what would become my last baby, my fifth baby. I had horrible pregnancies. I would be stuck on the couch, unable to eat, unable to not eat. My older kids knew that when mama was pregnant again, the white vomit bowl would be on my nightstand, and I kept it there for months on end. Everything made me horrendously sick until about 5 months into the pregnancies. I'm telling you, it is nothing short of God's grace that I did this 5 times. Every single one felt like it could be the end of me. Okay, back to the story. So here I was, high on oxytocin from nursing this big, beautiful baby and loving those early days of how babies seem to grow so fast. And it hit me like a semi truck. It started with body aches and tremendous fatigue. And then came the fever that took me 5 years to recover from. My husband had come home sick from work, feeling like he had some swollen lymph nodes, saying that people at the office were getting sick as well. Something must be going around. And in my mind, I thought, well, here we go. When you're close, like husband and wife, or you are in a big family, it tends to run through everyone. I expected it. I thought that it would come and it would go. Only it did not. Since I was new to this world of chronic illness, and I mean a total amateur, I had no mental framework other than to assume that whatever came my way, like a cold, a sinus infection, a flu, something like that, well, I'd be over it in just a few days and back to my blissful, albeit highly demanding, life as a stay at home homeschool mom. Only for me, that is not what happened. As the days went by, I began to panic. I was smiling on the outside. My life was moving on. That's one thing that I learned. Life doesn't slow down just because you don't feel well. And that seemed like some cruel sense of the universe to me at the time. But here I am smiling on the outside, and everything on the inside of me is screaming, what is wrong with me? Why am I not recovering? My husband recovered just fine. The people at his office recovered something fine. Wasn't that just the flu? Why am I not getting over it? And what's worse, why does everything seem to be getting worse and worse? Why do these symptoms seem to be building on each other? Seem to be things that I couldn't name, couldn't put my finger on, couldn't exactly describe even how I was feeling. All I knew that something had radically changed inside my body, and I didn't know when I was going to be back to myself again. So the days dragged on. It's hard to summarize this in a 5 year health journey in a matter of one podcast episode. So I think it's best if I talk about it in these two ways. I think I'll talk about my experience in terms of what I felt, what I was afraid of. So the emotional piece. But then I also want to talk about what I physically went through so that you can get an idea of what that was like for me as well. So let's go ahead and start with those emotions. I experienced a roller coaster of emotions. I was up, I was down. I was hopeful, I was depressed. The best way I could describe what I truly felt was that expression, the dark night of the soul. Have you had one of those before? I had that. You know that period in your life where everything feels too big, too scary, too demanding, too difficult, the thing that you just don't know if you're going to survive. That. I had that. I was afraid. I was consumed with what was wrong with me. Every new symptom became a new piece to the puzzle to solve. Did I have cancer or a disease that doctors just couldn't uncover? I felt like I didn't belong. I didn't fit into any box. Was it Lyme disease? Well, I didn't have joint pain or fatigue, and all those tests were negative. Was it mold? Maybe, but I couldn't find any in my house, and my tests were borderline. Was it MS? No, I had a brain MRI, and that was clear. Was it cancer? Surely it's something. What was it? But all my markers would come back continuously negative. Brain tumor. It must have been a brain tumor. But no, my scans were all clear. What about an autoimmune disease? What's going on? Is my thyroid failing? Am I getting some type of unknown disease that I'm going to be written about in medical journals? Just what was going on with me? But my markers were all clear for that too. And no signs or symptoms seemed to point to anything. So then, how could I explain all these mystery symptoms? Well, the thing is that I couldn't. But everything became real for me. The sun on my face, the smell of freshly mowed grass, the singing of birds, the sound of the ocean, the first steps my last baby took, the taste of a great bite of food, the cheer and the merriment found in holidays and celebrations. All of life felt like it was in slow mo, and it all felt finite to me. I also felt invisible. Here I was, walking through life in this body that was breaking down on the inside, but my pain and my despair was completely invisible to others. Throughout this entire time, I continued to CrossFit. I swam competitively with my master's team. In fact, fun fact, I was even training for nationals for swimming before COVID shut down all those pools. Here I would go to church. I'd get my hair done. I wore my dress. I went to birthday parties. I took my kids to parks and parties, all the while being consumed on the inside by despair and these feelings of desperation. I so badly wanted my life back. I so badly wanted to make it through a day without the limitations of how I felt. So, what does this do to a person? Well, you feel like nobody gets you. It's hard to know if and where you fit in. Was anyone else in their dark night of the soul? Where were my people at? You fear being too much for others. If I told them what was really going on inside my head, if what I really thought about day and night, I was afraid people would just laugh at me. And I knew for sure that they couldn't possibly understand. I was afraid of judgment. Even the best of people mean well, but they often don't get it, right? Oh, you're just stressed, my friends would say. Well, maybe you should rest more. It's all in your head. You're just an overachiever. Just calm down. Everyone seemed to want to add their 2 cents. I knew that I needed to be strong for my 5 kids who were used to a mother who was present 110% of the time. Enter mom guilt. Can you relate to that? So much emotions going on when you feel like you are breaking down on the inside. So, what was it like physically? What was my personal experience like? For me, it started 6 weeks postpartum. I originally thought that it was just a flu like experience that I just never recovered from. but I was still technically postpartum. Maybe it was hormones. I couldn't quite ever put my finger on things. I know that it started with a fever and a splitting headache with the worst body aches of my life. Utter exhaustion, swollen lymph nodes, turned into tingling up and down my spine, tingling in my face, especially on my left side, hands and feet. My eyes would twitch randomly throughout the day. I would get tremors in my hands. And as the weeks went on, more symptoms were added until at one point I kept a chart of over 40 symptoms that I was experiencing. Charting was stressful though. To see it all on paper was to acknowledge the reality of my days. Charting was helpful to see the patterns and eventually to show progress as symptoms disappeared too, though. So there was the good and bad with that. Sometimes it's important to get specific, you know? Just repeating to yourself that you feel like crap isn't always the most helpful. It was helpful for me to write exactly what was going down in my body and label it with a number, like the severity from 1 to 10 that I was experiencing it on every day of the month. And sure enough, over months that turned into years, I saw patterns, which eventually was helpful for me to recover my health. And I felt like I tried it all. I was on a mission, as ambitious as I was as that homeschool mom, determined to run her home like a well oiled machine and have well liked and well obedient kids. I was on that same mission, but for myself now to find answers. I became like the queen of the hunter gatherer for answers. I went to Dr. Google. I joined all the Facebook groups. I researched the hell out of everything. I found the best doctors I could find. I read all of the books. I started to travel since I couldn't find good help at home. I followed all the protocols. Any doctor that I saw, I was a yes man. Yes, ma'am, actually. I followed all of the diets. I chased all of the rabbit holes. I did all of the things. I would meet people. I would get to know their story. I would learn from them what helped, and I would find out what worked for them, what didn't work, what they tried, what they were going to try next. It was like a massive collaboration project happening in the secrecy of my own mind. But through it all, here's the thing that I want you to know. I never gave up hope that I would heal. If there was one thing that I believed, the one thing that kept driving me forward, it was the belief that my body could heal. I don't know where that deep belief came from. I was just so glad that it was there because that one thought alone carried me through this dark night of the soul where ultimate loneliness was found for me, where so much fear and despair was met with hope. And I eventually did heal, but it wasn't until I found functional medicine, which became my missing piece. I'll pause there because the next part of the story gets quite good. So stay tuned for part 2. Thank you for joining me today on Tracy Aaron Talks. I hope you found today's episode enriching to your life. If you enjoyed today's content, would you consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving a review? That simple act helps this podcast get into the hands and ears of many more women just like you. Remember, anything you want and do not yet have will require a new set of beliefs, thoughts, actions, and a new you. I am honored to be on this journey with you as we wholeheartedly pursue true health and wellness in mind, body, and soul.